Hey, Dr. Julie,
Hello.
what did the one casket say to the other casket?
Is that you coughing?
That's right,
What
is
is
that
that?
you coughing? So today's episode is Asthma Aspirations. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Prime Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Skip Weiss, the Bowtie Chiropractor. Bring in the dad jokes. Do you know where I keep all my dad jokes, babe? In a dad base.
Been hanging out with Brecken.
Yep. Hey, I'm back with my fabulous co-host and wife, Dr. Julie Weiss, the BDC certified coach, Dr. Fairy Fingers. How are you today?
I'm good.
It is very good to see you. You look super pretty. You got my favorite green on. I appreciate that. You always bring a little extra light into my life, and I appreciate that. So we are in the season where we have been talking about a lot about allergies, sickness, cold and flu, sugar season, inflammation, all that kind of stuff, right? But there's something that we actually haven't hit on yet, and I think it's extremely important that we get into this little bit of conversation here because it's super important, and that is talking about asthma. Asthma is very, very common. In fact, in the world right now, there is over $56.3 billion a year in the world that is actually spent on asthma. Can you believe that?
It doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't surprise me either, no. And breathing aids like albuterol and inhalers are very, very common amongst the kids we see here in our office. And I think it's something that, from a parent's perspective, can be very scary and very debilitating at the same time. Because when we see our kids having an asthma attack, when we see them not able to breathe, a lot goes through our head.
I was just like you said inhalers, and like those were an inhaler sounded more common as we were growing up. Now it's nebulizer treatments.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's like that was not something that I think even like our generation, that I don't know if that's an overuse issue or if that is just the alarming numbers of kids that are suffering that needs those therapies.
Well, those nebulizer treatments are a form of steroid, but they're given to the child for a longer period. I remember nebulizers when I was a kid, but I wasn't using them. My grandpa was using them. My grandpa had COPD and
serious condition.
Yeah, and he had a congestive issue of his lungs, and because of that, he was on it all the time. He had to do a nebulizer 2 to 3 times a day. He was a chronic
But we're
smoker.
talking chronic condition.
Exactly, chronic condition.
Not in our young kids.
No, and he, like, it was basically there to try to keep him alive after he had his heart attack and allow him to breathe better, but we shouldn't be seeing it in children. And it's one of those things that we see in the emergency rooms that they use a lot, that they'll put a kid on a nebulizer treatment whether or not they have asthma, but more importantly, they're trying to open up those lung fields, right? And the issue with that is that the area of the lungs is controlled by what nerves? Between your shoulder blades. Exactly. And when we have subluxation between the shoulder blades, misalignments, that causes irritation between the nerves that are trying to control the lungs and the lungs trying to control and communicate back to the brain, right?
But I feel like a first comment is like, well, how would I know if I have a subluxation there? How does that happen? Well, does anybody have a cell phone? Right. If we constantly sit like this, so if you have,
I was wondering where you were going with that.
Well, no, I'm just like, because sometimes, like, if I'm thinking about this from the other side, if I'm a mom or a parent, and I'm wondering, well, would my child, how would that even happen? Yes, from birth, but if we talk about, being active in sports or just sitting at our desks now that kids are back in school, and how do we sit at our desks? Crouched over,
forward,
right? If we're on our computers, if we're on our phones, head down, that all changes our biomechanics, which then moves our vertebra, which then turns those nerves off, and those are those nerves that are between our shoulder blades.
Yep.
So that was like your tangents that you typically do.
That's a good tangent. That was a good tangent, but then it changes the mechanics, right? Yeah. So the child will have a problem moving back and forth, bending side to side. They'll be always hunched forward. They can't stand up. Like typically you look at your child and you tell them to put their shoulders back all the time. Like, put your shoulders back, and it hurts them to put their shoulders back. that all causes issues, but more importantly, that controls their lung function, controls the diaphragm as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk a lot of this with our moms with breath and flow work, but more importantly, diaphragm control comes from when they're kids
Mm-hmm.
and when they're what?
When developing, when we're
Right, when
learning
you're
to
learning to
crawl,
crawl,
roll
right?
over. I mean, it's the things that we are born with. It's innate
Hmm.
that our bodies, like God made us amazing, that our bodies know how to do these things. And we go through and develop through these progressions. It needs to happen in the right time frames. They need to happen and for a length of time. And when we race our kids through steps,
Hmm.
or oh, it was no big deal, my
Try to
child
rush them
didn't
along.
didn't really crawl, they just went right from sitting to walking. That's great if you think of that as a child, that they're, growing up so quickly, but then we're going to reach an age of, well, there is other important developmental steps that needed to happen at that same time.
Yeah, and rushing the child through there changes the way that their core develops, and they don't get a chance to sit up on their own, rock back and forth, crawl both backwards and forwards, and then learn to pull themselves up, establish that core stability. But more importantly, that establishes the top and bottom of their core. So it establishes their pelvic floor, and it establishes their diaphragm. And if that doesn't develop properly, that will lead to a myriad of breathing issues when they're older. And this is common when we see it with athletic induced asthma. I think that is something that comes in commonly diagnosed at a lot of parents when we ask them, even adults, did you have asthma issues when you were a child? And most of them, most commonly, it's about 1 in every 2 adults that I take care of, or young adults. I had athletic induced asthma and I grew out of it. And what that tells me is it's their inability to get a deep breath when they're under stress. And running down the field feeling like they're going to pass out, that feeling of going hypoxic, it's a scary feeling, or not being able to get a deep breath. I've had those issues. I've had asthma attack. I mean, I've had panic attacks where it sucks. When I got my first one, that was hard, and you were sitting there watching me very worried, and I was very worried too. And that was a few years back, but I remember that feeling of not being able to get in a deep breath, and it's pretty scary. Now, from a parent's perspective, a mom's perspective, what are some of the things, Dr. Julie, that you feel that moms and dads should be aware of when they're taking care of a child with asthma, or they know that their child has athletic induced asthma? What do you think are some of the steps that they can do to help prevent that?
Look at the stressors that the child is under. I mean, I feel like if that's like a no-brainer. I would say get your child checked. Let's make
Checked
sure
by a chiropractor.
Yeah, that's sort of, that can see children. But I think really just start to look at the environment. Do you see that the asthmatic symptoms, pop up at certain times of the day, or is it with, certain different activities that they're doing within the sports?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that is a huge deal. And I think the other side of it is, with looking at their environment and what they're in, is what kind of stress do they put themselves under when they're running down the field? Are they running all hunched over? In basketball games, same thing. Are they hunched over? Are they not standing up trying to get in a deep breath? But more importantly, I don't think that parents need to run and get their kids on an asthma inhaler right away, because that's a steroid that allows their lungs to open up. But why are the lungs not opening up in the first place? Why are they not dilating? Why are we not having bronchodilation? And that's the thing, is the bronchioles in the lungs are actually what bring the oxygen in and then oxygenate the blood. Therefore, now we get oxygen throughout the body. But it's really important to understand this, because when a child has an asthma attack, or an adult, we start getting a lot of mucus formation trying to protect the lung tissue as well. So what's irritating the lung tissue? What's not allowing it to stay nice and full of good moist air? And these are all things that we need to understand and be really, really careful of as parents, to allow our children to have the best life going forward. Correct?
Say our bodies are really good at giving us printouts of what's going on. Like those are our error commands, right?
Yeah.
Everybody understands, like, if an error pops up, on your computer or your phone, you need to restart the system, like reboot. But our bodies are really good at giving us and throwing those error codes.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's, plugged up mucous membranes, if that's, that we can't breathe, if that's ear infections, our body is telling us, hey, something is wrong. We need to, instead of, covering up what that says on the phone, right, or ignoring it like it's going to go away, instead, if we figure out, like, okay, why is my computer constantly throwing that error code? If we can figure out why that error code is happening, then we can reboot the whole system, And then everything is magical and everything works exactly like like it's supposed to. So that's exactly what our bodies do as well. The struggle is it's so easy lots of times to be able to get that error code and then figure out, well, what can we do to just take care of that error code, not figure out why that code is happening.
I think that's a perfect explanation as to why we need to get checked and check for those error codes. Now, another symptom that we see with a lot of young adults is this direct pain right over the heart. And a lot of pediatricians and actually pediatric cardiologists and pulmonologists will commonly call us and ask us, hey, can you help children with this chest pain? And what it is it mimics angina in adults, but it's children that get pinpoint poker pain right through their heart. And a lot of adults will think that the child is having some form of heart issue or heart attack when really it's not. And it's actually a rib subluxation. It's a misalignment of the rib tissue, but even more importantly, it's actually the cause, it's actually the start of scoliosis happening between the shoulder blades, where we're getting a curvature happening between the shoulder blades. And the only profession that I know of on this earth that can actually help the body get back to normal communication, therefore try to actually proactively help the body and keep it hopefully from developing a scoliosis, is chiropractic care. Because even physical therapists, they stretch, they do bracing, but until we get proper communication back where the body's changed its position, only about 2 to 3% of all scolioses are actually congenital, where they were there from birth. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the rest of them, and even in adulthood, adult scoliosis also comes into play, and this is where they get the chest pain. And they'll get this deviation of the ribs, which then causes tremendous chest pain. And the thing that we need to be very aware of here is that if we don't go about this and get this early enough, or check a child, or if they're complaining to you about this, that is an early sign, actually a mid sign of the body starting to change shape.
Well, I was thinking on both sides of that. Like if we're talking about heart attack, how many times has somebody as an adult or even a child gone into the ER thinking they had a heart attack and all the tests are run and they're inconclusive. And you're like, but all these things were happening. Well, that's where a subluxation in that area, that's not just going to go away. Mm-hmm. On, the flip side of that being, well, man, are these indicators, if we have a subluxation in that area, those nerves also control the heart. Mm-hmm. And so, like, we're talking asthma and allergies. Yep. But if those things are left unresolved, does that potentially put a cascade of extra stressors on the heart that could potentially lead to heart concerns? It does lead to heart concerns. It's not potential, it does, because the lower neck controls, if we want to get real crazy and geek out here with neurology, the stellate ganglia. The stellate ganglia sits in the lower part of the neck, upper part of the T-spine, so basically right here in your neck. And the issue with that is that the cool thing is the stellate ganglia controls the heart. It controls heart rate. It helps control it speeding up and slowing down. And the most significant thing about this is that we see a great deal of adults that come in with anxiety, with problems getting a deep breath, with their heart feeling like it wants to jump out of their chest, where it doesn't seem to calm themselves down, and they just feel like they're running 100 miles an hour. And what we've seen through the neurology is that these nerves directly control the heart, and the stellate ganglia is in the lower part of the neck, upper part of the T-spine, upper part of the back. Therefore, if we have misalignments, irritation there, that does not help the stellate ganglia function properly. Now, I'm not saying it's causing heart attacks. I'm not saying that it's causing anxiety. I'm not saying that it's causing the heart to move too much or too slow, but it has a direct effect there. So common knowledge would lead us to believe that if we have irritation in that area, it's not going to help the function properly come out of the stellate ganglia. It's not going to help proper function. And that's not okay with me. So when we look at these children and we have these kids out there with asthma, we have them with breathing difficulties, pain in the lungs, problems getting a deep breath, that is a serious issue, and we need to really understand how that works. Now, Dr. Julie, we have seen patients come in, and we're not saying we have the cure to asthma. I am not saying that at all. But what do you think are the first and easy steps for a parent to start getting their child checked by a chiropractor? Or what are the things they need to go on? Because usually we don't talk a lot about chiropractic on this podcast. Mm-hmm. And this one is one of those things with asthma, especially in children, where chiropractic is a very, very important remedy. It's important to get the kids checked, mm-hmm. right? And so sometimes they're like, well, I don't even know if that's a starting point. There's many offices that do a a whole number of tests. And so we need to test the system to see if there's some underlying things that we're not seeing, right? It's just like you can look healthy, you can have a marathon runner that looks healthy, right? Everybody's presenting in beautiful health, and then the next day, God forbid, something happens. They have a heart attack, they die, and it's right. So when somebody has an outward appearance that they look ill or something's going on, that's easy to look at that person and say, okay, there's something going on. Asthma is not an outward thing unless somebody's having an asthma attack. And so the easiest, quickest way is to get the nervous system checked. And so that's by doing tests and then seeing a chiropractor. So then those test results, right? So it's one thing to get the information, but then we have the information, we need to be empowered and we need to do something with that information.
Exactly. We need to check that nervous system. That's actually the key, is check that nervous system. And if people really want the analytical data, the numbers behind it, we have software that checks the nervous system and allows us to give out clinical printable data that shows heart rate variability, stress on the body. Is it working too much? Is it working too little? How is it actually adapting and coping to stress? How are those muscles working? Are they fighting gravity too hard, which then robs it away from other organ cellular systems? Huge thing.
Because we're not guessing.
No, we're not guessing. We don't guess at all. And that's the thing, is that if we want to be specific, if we want to be precise with our children's care and our family's care, then you need to have them to a chiropractor and see what's going on with those nervous systems to make sure their body is functioning and communicating at its optimum. And that is one of the coolest parts of our job. And we get to see it every day with the kids that come in and out. We get to see everything. And it's a very, very, very special thing. Now, Dr. Julie, I know going out here, do you have any further takeaways that you'd like to give to our moms out there with children that have asthma? Is there hope?
No, I think there's absolutely hope. I think it's just, again, in that moment, we understand the reactionary, what those steps look like. But then after that reactionary, okay, now we need to be proactive. So if we have a child that's suffering, let's figure out the steps that we need to do. Step 1, make that phone call. Step 2, schedule, to get those tests run. And then step 3, follow up and make sure that we're on a care schedule, because it's not a one and done thing. This is, we need to start to change neurology. This button, the neurology just didn't turn off one day, decided it doesn't want to work. This has been an ongoing concern. And so getting on the right care plan that we can make sure that we can rechange that neurology, we can retrain the brain, and then all of a sudden it's not magical that my child just grew out of it. No, the body has learned a new program and it's now functioning just like it's supposed to.
Exactly. And I don't think I could have said it any better myself. And for you parents out there and adults that are dealing with a lot of asthma issues, breathing issues, this time of year with the environment starting to get a little bit drier and your home's getting a little bit drier, have your humidifiers running. Make sure that you've got good moisture in your houses as well to help with your lung development and help your lungs work properly. But even more importantly, get your bodies checked to make sure everything's communicating properly. This goes hand in hand with allergies, with sickness, cold and flu, inflammation, sugar problems. All of this culminates. And if we want to prevent this and get ahead of it, we leave a healthy lifestyle. And if you have questions, reach out to us here on the podcast. Leave comments below. Email us. You can definitely do that. You can send it to Dr. Julie at primefamilycenters.com or Dr. Skip at primefamilycenters.com. I didn't know if you were going to make me give the other email addresses, but just reach out, or you can call our office 920-468-4199. Schedule a phone call if you'd like. We have 5 minutes for anyone, and if we can help you at all, we will do it. Any other words going away, Dr. Julie?
No, that's great.
Well, this was another good one, guys. So if you need anything, reach out. Everybody go out there, take care, get it done. Have a great week. Bye, everyone.